Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the 4 o'clock news and politics show. Just chatted with Jennifer Lawless down at American University. We're getting a lot more local here. Paul Doughty, the head of the Providence Firefighter Union. Thanks for coming in today.
Hi, Kate. My pleasure.
You've been a little active in social media in the last couple days. There's been some chatter pertaining to the elephant in the room, the $1 billion unfunded pension liability, and how certain city council members are approaching it. Let's talk a little bit about what you heard maybe in the last week in the press pertaining to who's been sitting down and talking about this and who hasn't.
So recently the City Council of Providence released a working group pension report, and it disappoints me that if you're going to have a working group, bring all the stakeholders in, because the report represented a collection of ideas, and I think that labor is critically important. We're going to be the ones that are half of the bargain, so not to give us the time or the opportunity to share our ideas or maybe to collaborate and come up with synergistic ideas was unfortunate.
And so you, again, had to have known, here we are, it's 2018, after the Tavares administration and the deals that were cut back then. Did you have a sense that this is the time frame that we were looking to be on as the city to sort of revisit and reopen the issue?
No, I think that the firefighters have both worked with Mayor Tavares and Mayor Lorza during the last couple of years of strife. So it was disappointing, again, that the working group comes out and expects us to readjust the pension agreement that was negotiated by Sam Zurier, who was the object of my Twitter storm. And he signed it knowing what the cost would be. So I feel like it's buyer beware. We were well aware of what the consequences were going to be, what the concessions were going to be, and what the cost was going to be. And I expect the same from both Councilman Zurier and the council more broadly, that they did their due diligence and that they actually read it before they signed it.
So where does this put us now if you weren't part of the working group, and if they have suggestions about how to move forward, do they now say, oh, come to the table now?
Well, you can see my frustration. It becomes really problematic. Now that I've raised the issue that you didn't include us, if you invite us, I think there's a lost opportunity, and it's a way just to build a bigger and thicker wall. And the success between the firefighters and Mayor Tavares was due almost singularly in because of the point he gave us all of the documents that we asked for. It was cordial, it was always respectful, there were no ambushes, there were no working group papers that came out that I didn't know about.
Did you feel ambushed?
Ambushed in the sense that the start of an ambush. Obviously they didn't make any headway on this, and I think that's part of the problem. I don't think they're going to make any headway. If you're not bringing in the person on the other side of the table with you, you shouldn't expect to succeed. And to me it means that you're considering doing it by force, and that's my concern. If you want to do it by force, you're going to have a fight on your hands. We're not looking to give anything back, anything. But if there were areas regarding the pension where we found common ground, now you've lost the opportunity to maybe enjoy whatever changes we could have agreed to mutually.
And you've had conversations with the councilman since the Twitter exchange. Find any common ground?
Now, I spoke to Councilman Zurier at his invitation today, and I expressed the same concerns I'm sharing with you now. I thought it was a lost opportunity, but with that said, I'm still open. If there's good ideas, they're good ideas, whether he consulted with us or not. I didn't see any in that report, but that doesn't mean that none exist.
And you've raised a few issues on Twitter yourself pertaining to other areas to look at, perhaps, in city spending and city obligations. One that you took to task was healthcare for city council members.
Yeah, a little sarcasm involved there, but it just goes to show if I'm going to look at what their issues are, that to me is one that I know resonates with the public, as does pension reform. So I think when you're playing to the public, then you better be prepared to be played back against.
And what is the sense of the union, again, as the issues clearly now back in the forefront? It is an election year. People keep tossing out the big B word. We don't really see much movement towards it. He addressed it in his piece about surgical bankruptcy, but the reticence for him, because we all know what that could potentially look like. Is that in the union situation, is that just the worst case scenario?
I don't think it's a realistic scenario, and what I base that on is the city has a surplus, run a surplus last year, projected to run one again this year. And also, we haven't had any tax increases, and we're not advocating for tax increases, but it does go to the ability to raise money to prevent a bankruptcy. Obviously, when you're going to have a bankruptcy case, you know all the damage that's going to be done, as goes Providence, as goes the state. So all of those things, I do think the economy in Providence is improving, and I don't think talking about it from our political leaders is helpful, and I think that's why they're reluctant to even say it. And then I think from a legal, a very sharp legal point of view, we're not even close. So I think there's ways to avoid it. And again, that goes to why I think Councilman Zuria lost an opportunity to find somewhere where we can agree, or there could be trade-offs. But if that's how you're going to treat us, that we can't sit at the big table, then don't come to us later on with your ideas for us to adopt.
So what do we expect the next steps are? We saw what the working group sort of came out with. You've had a conversation with the councilman. Do we have any sense as to what's next?
There's a bill pending at the General Assembly related to the sale of the Water Supply Board, so we're watching that. We really don't have a stake in it. And other than that, there was some talk about putting together another working group, this time with the unions, but again, I said, it's much more difficult to be nice after you've taken a shot at me, and so he'll have a challenge if that's what his plan's going to be.
I mean, if the union was brought to the table for the next working group, I mean, you just articulated your position. I mean, what would the union bring to the table in that working group discussion?
Well, so one of the primary issues that we face is if the sort of the impetus to get us to agree to any changes are the trade-off that we won't ask you again. That's what you told us last time, and now not only are you asking that again in the context of this working group paper, but you didn't even tell us about it. You surprised us with it. So it makes us really reluctant to think that we've got a partner on the other side that's going to engage with us honestly, ethically, and with a sense that I really mean what I say, that we're not going to come back. So it makes us really reluctant to sit at the table, both because there's some futility there, and in particular, Councilman Zuria was at the last table and agreed that this was the end of it.
Were you, just surprised? Did you think, dating back to the last one, that there could be any potential that they would try to reopen it?
No. Mike D'Amico is one of the smartest people I've ever dealt with, one of the most honest brokers I've ever dealt with on behalf of the city, and he laid it out. There is nobody that was at the table that did not have the access, the time, or the opportunity to look at what his projections were, to challenge him on his projections. And he laid out that it's 3.5% every year. Nobody should be surprised. And we understand that there's going to be an increase both in the size of the revenue that comes in as well. Whether those perfectly trail each other is a question that should have been asked at the time. And right now there's really no divergence. It hasn't been long enough that we can say, oh, this is not going to work. So unless Mike D'Amico tells me this isn't going to work, I'm not going to believe anybody.
So you got to hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Correct. He put it together brilliantly, and for anyone else to say that it's not when they didn't say it at the time is suspect to me. And also, I put into context the time of year it is. This is an election year.
It's an election year.
And nobody likes paying for pensions. It's that simple.
So what have you heard from membership this week in the little sparring and back and forth? What are you hearing from the rank and file?
Actually, not too much. Morale's much improved since we went back to the 4 shifts. We just settled all our outstanding litigation with the city as well. So they don't necessarily get fired up on some of the nonsense that goes on. They'll leave that to me.
They've been certainly fired up in the past, but certainly fired up in reaction to what you heard from Councilman Zuria. So I appreciate your taking the time to come in and give folks a little bit of the lay of the land and what's taking place here in the city of Providence. Paul Doughty, hopefully we'll have you in soon.
My pleasure.
Okay, thanks. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.